draft expert Todd McShay releasing his first-round mock draft following the completed season. He still has the Jags taking Trevor Lawrence with the #1 overall pick. However, listen to this. Todd has the Jets taking BYU quarterback Zach Wilson at #2, and he also has 2 trades taking place with the Panthers, moving up to take North Dakota State quarterback Trey Lance at #3, and the Bears trading up to take Alabama quarterback Mac Jones with the 12th pick. All right, so now it is only right that we welcome in the master of the mock draft, Todd McShay, into the show. And Todd, I'm sure after you release this, your social media has been absolutely blowing up because you have 4 quarterbacks being taken in the top 5 picks and 5 quarterbacks being taken total in the top 12 picks. So how many of these quarterbacks do you really see as quality NFL starters?
Well, if you just look at it, Trevor Lawrence is kind of a one-in-a-decade type of quarterback prospect. And that's why Urban Meyer took the job at Jacksonville. And he's going to be the #1 overall pick. After that, there's a little bit of a gap. But I think Zach Wilson from BYU belongs at that #2 spot. Now, the Jets have to decide, are they going to move on with Sam Darnold or are they going to move him out of town? And if they move him out of town and get a trade, I think they stay at 2 and take Zach Wilson. If not, and they decide that Darnold's their guy moving forward after all the other dominoes fall, if you will, in terms of the veteran quarterbacks as we go through trades and free agency, then I think they stick at #2, or they wind up trading out of that spot, and they wind up getting a different player and additional picks. They already have 2 first-round picks this year, 2 first-round picks next year. So if Darnold's the guy, they move back and allow a team like maybe Carolina moving up from 8 to 2 to go get Zach Wilson. So I think Wilson is firmly cemented in my mind in that #2 spot. After that, I think there is another gap, and that's where Trey Lance from North Dakota State comes in, and then also Justin Fields from Ohio State. They're very similar types of players. I like Lance slightly more than Fields because I think he processes things quickly, but both guys can extend. They're big, sturdy, durable, competitive guys who really can create and make plays as well. So listen, it's never happened in the common draft era where we've seen 4 quarterbacks go 1 through 4. So it may not happen this year, don't bet on it. But what I'm trying to show here is the demand for quarterbacks and how teams could trade up to try to go get their guy once we figure out where Carson Wentz goes. What happens with Deshaun Watson? Does Dak Prescott leave Dallas? Does San Francisco move on from Jimmy Garoppolo? There's so many pieces in this puzzle to put together, but right now, those are the top 4 quarterbacks, and then Mac Jones from Alabama is slightly behind those guys as the 4th tier, if you will, in the first round of quarterbacks, the 5 quarterbacks that I have in this mock draft.
Well, if it happened this way, it would be astounding. And yet even the fact that it's in your mock draft, I think, says a lot, Todd. Every year, it seems, early on, the prognosticators and your forecast, how many quarterbacks will be taken. Maybe this guy is a day 2 guy, maybe this guy. And every year, it seems, as the draft approaches, the quarterbacks are moving up. What I notice here on your list, it's not just the quarterback, offensive tackle, wide receiver. Like, where are the defensive ends?
Yep.
And then corners. It's all about the passing game, it seems like. Do you expect this draft finally to be the draft where it's just in plain sight like that? Nothing but quarterbacks and wide receivers, and then the guys who have to cover the wide receivers, basically.
Yeah, Max, I mean, that's where the league is gone, right? I mean, we're playing more of a spread-out game. You have to have a quarterback. We all know that, and that's been the case for forever. But you have to have guys that can go make plays. And this year, there are 3, in my opinion, that belong in the top 10. Jamar Chase from LSU opted out this past season. Go back and study 2019 tape. He has the best traits. And by that, I mean size, speed, ability to go up and make contested catches of all these receivers. Devontae Smith, after Jalen Waddle, his teammate, got injured, Devontae Smith stepped up and had arguably the best wide receiver year that we've ever seen in college football. And I always compared him to Marvin Harrison. Skinny legs, doesn't look the part of the #1, but he just knows how to get open. He finds a way to create after the catch. He can get vertical, and he does a great job of working the middle of the field when they ask him to do so. And then Jalen Waddle from Alabama, his teammate, who got injured, as I mentioned, he's the most dynamic playmaker in this entire draft with the ball in his hands. Reverses, screens, and also as a vertical receiver. So those 3 guys, in my opinion, belong in the top 10. We'll see how it all shakes out.
And Waddle, maybe his comp, maybe if things pan out, is Tyreek Hill. I think it's a legitimate question in this NFL. Who would you rather have, Marvin Harrison in his prime or Tyreek Hill? I mean, those are there. That's the upside, but still. But not that long ago, like, I don't know, like
I'll
the last several years
I'll
even.
Take either.
You could find, what's that? Yeah, right, yeah. No one's complaining. You could find, of course, you could find real game-changing talent later in the draft. We see Pro Bowl and All-Pro caliber talents in the second round, and much later even. Are you saying that's changing? Is it going to be harder? Like, you didn't find guys who could pressure the quarterback from the outside much later in the draft. You had to take those guys early. But is this changing now? If you want a game-changing wideout, are you going to have to grab them up high?
I don't know necessarily that you have to in the top 10. There's also depth behind these guys. I mean, anyone who watched Florida football this year, Kadarius Toney is a special playmaker. He's a little bit like a Jalen Waddle, where he's not your traditional, X wide receiver on the perimeter. You can play him outside. You can move him in the slot. You can move him in the backfield. He's just an offensive weapon, and he creates a lot of plays just with the ball in his hands. Rashad Bateman from Minnesota is probably going to be a second-round pick. Reminds me a lot of Juju Smith-Schuster for Pittsburgh. He's going to come in. He's going to run a 4.56. Everyone's going to say, he doesn't have the speed. He doesn't have the traits. But he's going to be ready to go. He's a big, sturdy, physical receiver who goes up and makes plays when the ball's in the air. So there are a lot of really good wide receivers in this class. Certainly you want to get one of the top three we talked about with Chase, Smith, and Waddle. But if you don't, there are plenty of guys to get late in the first and into the second and third rounds.
All right, Todd, you touched on this just a little bit earlier, but I want to go back to it because you have the Panthers trading up for Trey Lance. Why would they draft him over Justin Fields?
Well, first of all, talking to Matt Rule and the Carolina defensive coordinator and another assistant coach, they all reiterated the same point. We lost 8 games by 1 score last year. We feel like we have a roster that is playoff ready if we have the quarterback that can lead that drive in the fourth quarter. And so they had Mac Jones at the Senior Bowl all week, and I think they really liked him. And how could you not like what you saw from him during practice during those 3 days in Mobile, Alabama? But I think Trey Lance and also Justin Fields, they provide a little bit more in terms of extending plays and just being playmakers. And I went with Lance slightly ahead of Fields. And everyone's yelling at me, like you talked about with social media, saying, well, how could you put Lance ahead of Fields and you're down on Fields? It's not the case. They have identical grades. Fields is going 4 overall. So we're talking about a top 5 pick. But I just think Lance, they have very similar skill sets in terms of being big, sturdy, strong-arm quarterbacks that are mobile and can create after the initial play breaks down. But I think Lance is able to process a little bit quicker. He didn't play this past year, just the 1 game. It wasn't an opt-out. It was because it was at the FCS level. But if you go back and study the 2019 tape of him, he's got a chance to be special. He just needs some time to develop and the right coaching staff and the right situation around him. But I think Lance and Fields are, as I said, kind of that third tier of quarterbacks behind Lawrence and Wilson. But they're not going to last on the board very long. I'll be surprised if either of them are available past pick 10.
Todd, I understand why Jacksonville would say, all right, we have Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson's available, but same program. If anything, Trevor Lawrence looked even better earlier in his college career than Deshaun Watson. We have him on a rookie deal. Deshaun Watson making $160 million. We're good. But is there any other team drafting in the first round where they wouldn't offer that quarterback, like the quarterback, Zach Wilson or whomever, Justin Fields, is such a sure thing that they wouldn't be better off offering that plus stuff in a trade for Deshaun Watson?
How much is it going to cost, Max? I mean, that's the whole thing. It really is. And, the Jets are sitting there at number 2. They have 2 first-rounders this year. They have additional third-round picks this year and next year. They have 2 first-rounders next year. They have more draft capital this year and next year than any other organization in the league. And there's a really good chance they wind up moving Sam Darnold. And maybe that could be part of the solution in terms of getting a trade done with Houston, is being able to send a viable quarterback prospect and player and a guy who can be really good if he has the pieces around him, which he has not had with the Jets. So I think that the Jets have the best opportunity in terms of draft capital and the situation, but I don't know that they're willing to give up 3 first-rounders and Sam Darnold. You know, they've built to get here so they can build their own roster. Are they going to give up all of that to bring in Deshaun and then basically lose your first-round picks this year and next year? It's going to be interesting to see. The draft really starts at number 2 with the New York Jets and their decision.
Can I offer
Todd, you got some bold
Houston the
predictions,
11th
obviously.
pick and Daniel Jones, perhaps?
Daniel Jones is
Sure,
interesting.
Max.
Yeah,
Todd, add that to your mock draft.
Listen, Daniel Jones could get moved. You never know. I mean, Daniel Jones is interesting. What happens with Dak Prescott in Dallas? Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco. The Bears need a quarterback. They're sitting at 20. The Colts need a quarterback. They're at 21. Both talking to the Eagles about Carson Wentz. So there are so many dominoes that have to fall between now and the draft. And then we'll start to see a clearer picture of where these quarterbacks in the draft could wind up going. But there's going to be so much movement between now and late April that it's hard to project because we just don't know who the starting quarterbacks of these 32 NFL teams are going to be.
Yeah, you have most of the most dynamic quarterbacks going pretty early on, but I love Tom Brady's advice to the future draft class, saying you got to make every day count no matter where you're drafted. And look, no one knows better than him at this point. So, Todd, thank you so much. I wish you nothing but peace and harmony as you scroll through your Twitter feed today. So I know it's probably going to be a struggle.
I appreciate it.